Hi everyone, my name is Agnes and today I'm coming to you with a book haul. I thought I'd show you some of the books that I've recently acquired. Some of these were Christmas presents and about half of them I've already read. So let's get started. And the first book is The 20 Days of Turin by Giorgio De Maria. This is translated from the Italian by Ramon Glazov. And this is kind of a cult novel. It's written in the 1970s. And it's about the city of Turin that goes under this mysterious collective psychosis during which every night there are massacres that no one can explain, and these weird things are happening in the city. It all starts when this organization decides to build a library, but instead of books, this library holds the private diaries of the citizens of Turin, so people can come and read these diaries and maybe meet like-minded people, but instead this library becomes like a repository of people's worst thoughts. The book has this strange Lovecraftian atmosphere, and it reads like this fever dream written by David Lynch, and I really enjoyed it. And this edition actually has the story, The 20 Days of Turin, and also 2 short stories, and also a very good introduction that gives you a lot of historical context for the novel. The next book that I got is Transit by Anna Seghers, and this was translated from the German by Margot Bettauer-Dembo. Probably butcher that, but it says it's a story about an unnamed narrator who has escaped from the Nazi concentration camps in 1937 and is on his way to Marseille when he is asked to deliver a letter to an author in Paris. But when he gets there, he discovers that the author has committed suicide but left a suitcase with an unfinished manuscript. So he goes to Marseille and assumes a different identity, where he tries to piece together the author's life and also converses with other refugees while they wait for their transit papers. I believe this book has been adapted into a movie that is coming out either this year or next year, so I would like to read the book first. It sounds like a fascinating story, exploring many important topics. So yeah, looking forward to reading this. This next book was a Christmas present, and it's the Latvian edition of a book called Bury Me Behind the Baseboard by Pavel Sanayev. He's a Russian director and screenwriter, and this is his, to a large extent, autobiographical novel about a boy named Sasha who lives in Moscow. And it's a story about his childhood during the Soviet era. He's living with his grandparents, and it's a very hard childhood because his grandmother is very verbally abusive, but at the same time she loves him with this strange suffocating intensity. Even though the book describes these horrific everyday events, it has this hopeful and humorous tone, which is very hard to explain, but it makes the book a really enjoyable read despite the horrific things that we are witnessing at the same time. It's a very weird mix, but if this sounds interesting to you, I recommend checking this out. This next one was also a Christmas present, and it's the Latvian edition of The Aviator by Evgeny Vodolaskin. And I believe that this one comes out in the English translation sometime this year. So I'm going to read you the synopsis from the English edition. A man wakes up in a hospital bed with no idea of who he is and how he came to be there. The only information the doctor shares with his patient before urging him to write down every thought and feeling that comes to mind is the young man's name, Innokenty Petrovich Platonov. As Innokenty starts to write, out pours a kaleidoscope of images, faces, and events, weaving the story of a young man in Russia in the early 20th century through the turbulence of the Russian Revolution and its aftermath. As Innokenty begins to build a vivid picture of his former life, only one question remains. How is he able to remember the start of the 20th century when the pills by his bedside were made in 1999? So yeah, that sounds like a fascinating read, and I'm really looking forward to this one. I think I'm really going to enjoy it. And the next book that I got is Winter by Ali Smith. This is the second book in her seasonal quartet. And I've already read this one. And while I think this is a much more subtle and masterfully crafted book, I personally enjoyed Autumn more. That one left a more emotional impact on me. This one, while I appreciated what she did, and it's in many ways a very cleverly plotted story, it didn't really grip me emotionally, but I look forward to the next one in this series. And then I have Dinner at the Center of the Earth by Nathan Englander, and I've read this one as well, and this was a very interesting read. It looks at the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and it's very thought-provoking. It features very morally ambiguous characters, but at the same time it's a flawed novel. It tries to be too many things at the same time. It's a political thriller, a spy story, and a love story, and I think the author tried to put too much in this relatively short novel, but at the same time many of the scenes have really stayed with me. It looks at the idea of loyalty and being a traitor to your own country, and it looks how this conflict derails or even ruins the lives of people on both sides of the conflict. And I recommend it, although I felt that at the end it kind of fell apart a bit. It went into a direction that I wasn't expecting, and there were other aspects of the book that were much stronger, particularly the political aspect. But yeah, overall, a very good read. I also got some nonfiction books, and the first one is You Must Change Your Life, the story of Rainer Maria Rilke and Auguste Rodin by Rachel Corbett. And this looks at the friendship between Rilke and Rodin. In 1902, Rilke went to Paris to research and write a short book about Rodin, and even though they were total polar opposites, they became close friends. And this is a portrait of their friendship and also the people who surrounded them during that time. And it also explores how much Rodin's ideas about art and creativity influenced Rilke's Letters to a Young Poet. So that sounds fascinating, and I look forward to reading it. And finally, I have The Disaster Artist by Greg Sestero and Tom Bissell, and the tagline is My Life Inside the Room, the greatest bad movie ever made. So this is about the making of the independent film The Room, which is often considered to be one of the worst movies ever made. And it starred and was written, produced, and directed by Tommy Wiseau, this very eccentric guy who spent, I think, $6 million. And the film was a total commercial flop, but at the same time it became this cult classic because it goes beyond that point of being just bad and becomes entertaining. So it was written by Tommy's co-star, and he recounts the behind the scenes of the making of The Room. And you know how much I love books about film and the film industry, so this was right up my alley. Also, it was just made into a movie, and I'm still hoping to read it before I go see the film, and apparently the movie is really good too. At least the trailer was very funny, so I look forward to reading this. So those were all the books. Let me know which ones sounded interesting to you. Have you read any of these, and what are your thoughts? And I'll see you next time.